Good evening, and welcome back to the Masonic Roundtable, a weekly hangout where Masons from around the world get together to talk about Masonic news and opinions in a friendly and social manner. The standard disclaimer applies for tonight's episode. The thoughts and opinions expressed here are solely the opinions of the participants and do not reflect any Grand Lodge statements or positions. For tonight's episode, please keep your conversations open for the public and on the level. We will start off with introductions tonight. I am one of your hosts. I am Jason Richards. That was Mary because you can't have a show about the internet without cats. I am the Senior Warden of Acacia Lodge number 16 in good old Clifton, Virginia, and we will hand it over to one of the other hosts for tonight, Jonathan Ruark.
Hello. Welcome to our internet show, episode 104. My name is John Ruark, past master of course, the Patriot Lodge, number 1957 in Fairfax, Virginia. Robert, it's your turn.
Hey guys, Robert Johnson, past master of Waukegan Lodge, number 78 in Waukegan, Illinois, current secretary and a bunch of other stuff.
But not with a cat.
Not with a cat, because I don't like them.
You know who likes
He's also
cats?
a communist, ladies and gentlemen.
Nick, do you have a cat?
Two. I hate them, but I love them at the same time. Nick Johnson, past master, Corinthian Lodge number 67 in Big Time Farmington, and that was an amazing intro.
Thanks. That's
The best one yet.
It brought back memories. Juan Sepulveda, introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everybody. Juan Sepulveda here from Orange Blossom Lodge number 80 in sunny 60-degree Kissimmee, Florida, and the host of the Winding Stairs Freemasonry podcast, the proud owner of two cats, which I love, to send you. Just give me an address and I will send them. Good anymore.
Next person who orders a print from FreemasonryArt.com
You get a
gets
cat.
free cat.
But if you do
I'll
it in the
buy
next 5 minutes.
Free cat.
If that cat comes dead in a box, I'll buy one.
I'll send my cat in a box.
And last but not least tonight,
Cat in a box,
returning guest.
babe.
Tom Accuosti. Tom, introduce yourself, please.
Hi, Tom Accuosti, past master of Friendship 33 in Southington, Connecticut, author of the Tao of Masonry, and I kicked the cats out of the room for the evening because as soon as I settle down, you know that they're going to be pawing at the door anyhow.
Very true. Well, welcome again, Tom. It's good seeing you.
Pleasure being here.
And, of course, you'll have a wealth of knowledge for tonight's topic. Getting into Masonic news for this week. As a reminder, we are about a month shy of the PA Academy of Masonic Knowledge, where there will be a day-long event extolling the virtues of Masonic knowledge, and it just happens to be that all 5 of your hosts will be there, March 19th, Saturday, at the Freemasons Cultural Center at the Masonic Village in Elizabethtown, Pennsylvania. You will see not 1, not 2, not 3, but all 5. Well, I skipped over 4. All 5 of the TMR hosts there live. We got a great lineup of presentations, of scheduled topics, discussion points, and a couple other surprises that you just have to be there to find out what they are. So, anything else?
What happens if you can't make it to Pennsylvania, John?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Jason. We're currently in work to see how we can get this thing live streamed. There is internet available there. I just got the contact from the IT guy, but it looks like we'll try our best to do this live stream. So if you're used to watching us here on Google Hangouts, we will see what we can do to get that done on Saturday. So stay tuned for more details of where, if you can't attend it live, you can watch it live at home.
Now, you're going to want to attend it live if you can at all possible. Like John said, we have some surprises in store, and they're going to be fantastic. So you'll want to come out, hang out with us. We are going to be doing something after the event, and that'll be a little bit of a surprise too. But the idea here is that we just want to hang out with you that weekend. So after the event, we're going to have a little bit of a party and kick back and talk about Masonry.
Rock on. Sounds fun. Moving on to the next topic. Tom, since this showed up on your blog today and has created quite a stir on the internet, I'm going to let you open this can of worms. Tom, what happened today?
Oh, I'm sure you're talking about the case in Tennessee. And well, I'm going to start off by mentioning, back in September through October, we had a lot of Masons on the internet who were ready to get the torches and pitchforks because of all the stuff that was happening in Georgia. You probably remember in Georgia there was the Grand Master who had put up an edict forbidding homosexual behavior and fornication, which seems to me probably would have kicked out about 30% of the Masons in Georgia at the time, but actually 30% probably Masons anywhere at the time, but at least the fornication part. But lost in all of this was the thing that sort of precipitated the discussion, and that was the case of Worshipful Brother Dennis Clark from Tennessee, who was already in the middle of, possibly in the middle of having Masonic charges brought against him for violation of the Tennessee Masonic Code, which included homosexual behavior and also cohabitation outside of marriage. Tennessee,
and a whole list of other things too.
And a whole list of other things, but Brother Clark, unfortunately, lost his appeal. Well, at some point, not only did he lose his appeal, it looks like he stopped trying, and he was suspended for failure to answer the Masonic summons at which he was for which they were going through the trial. Now there's a fairly long story behind it, and I don't even pretend to have all the details, but the way it looks is that Brother Clark was a very active and very well liked Mason. He was in Scottish Rite, he was in York Rite. I think he was even in Shrine. He held offices all over the place. The guy had a string of like initials after, almost as many as Nick, for crying out loud, and a whole string of initials and everything after his name. And
did he have as many swords?
I don't think he did.
No.
I don't think anybody has the sword collection that Nick does. But.
Okay.
True.
But I'm sure he did very well for where he was, and there had been no previous complaints as to his Masonic service or everything that he did. And in fact, I understand that he and his partner, who was also a member of that lodge, and I have to say that's probably got to be a little bit awkward at times, but that's just the way that I'm looking at it. But he and his partner were both members of the lodge, and at some point they had a same-sex marriage, and I don't remember if Tennessee changed or if they went to another state and had it done. They posted pictures on Facebook, and that's when the trouble started at the home lodge, because they said, "Hey, we can't have gay guys getting married to each other. So there must be something that we could charge them with to get them out of here," or something to that effect. So they decided to charge him with cohabitation. Back in September, Brother Clark sent out emails to a number of other Grand Lodges and did a little bit of social networking to try to gain a little bit of support. And then the Grand Lodge of Tennessee had meetings, I think district meetings throughout the state, explained to them a little bit about what was going on, and asked the craft at the time not to talk to anyone, especially on social media or especially any reporters. This is the information that Tennessee Masons have been giving me over the course of today. this last night, Brother Clark left an email message or left a message on my blog saying that they lost the appeal and he had been suspended. I don't know too many other let's put it this way. I know some other details, but he and I have been emailing, and I don't have his permission to release any more information than what I'm going to talk about at the moment. But it appears to me that at some point they just got discouraged with the entire process, and it looks like they completely failed to answer the summons because they didn't see that there was going to be any good outcome for this. So they didn't show up at the summons. Grandmaster dropped the hammer, and as of this moment, he and his partner are both suspended. So
suspended, but not expelled.
At the moment, that's where it stands. Now they have their Grand Lodge meeting that's going to be coming, or the Grand Lodge communication, which will be coming up, I think, in May. So he's got a good 4 months of I don't know, either not getting into trouble or hoping that the next Grandmaster will rescind the suspension or something.
That's heavy stuff. We've been following this since it did break back in September, and we're hearing one side of the story, that's for sure. So we have to make sure we keep that as a huge caveat.
Mm-hmm.
But it's out there on the internet now. I think the most interesting thing is that hearing whispers of it trying to be covered up by the Grand Line is really something it's kind of an old school think, especially when things are out on the internet, to not talk about it, even though everyone's talking about it, and that it's all over the internet. And as we kind of, I wouldn't say joke, but as we say around here, that's not my jurisdiction. So while other brothers may be silenced, that this is something that needs to be talked about to bring to light these kinds of issues, and hopefully they get resolved in a friendly, brotherly manner.
You said something interesting there, John.
And our generation doesn't... Oh, sorry, Robert.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going to say that, John, you said something interesting when you said... actually, never mind. Go ahead, Jason.
So I'm going to start talking. It's interesting because you see a real generational difference in how you approach hard issues here. Because there's been a lot of things where we've seen, especially with this case, and a little bit of some of the Georgia stuff from last year, you get a lot of people saying don't talk about it. This is stuff that goes on in Lodge, and we should not talk about it whatsoever. And I feel like that hey, let's handle our business in-house is very much kind of the MO of some of the older generations, just how they did business. But it's really not how we as millennials who have grown up in the information age conduct ourselves. We want open transparency, open discourse. If there is something wrong in your house, you had sure as hell get your house in order before everybody else finds it out. And if everybody else finds it out, then that's more of a motivating factor for you to set things right and figure out what you're going to do.
And so I kind of alluded to this talking to the guys about this before the show. This is not unlike, maybe not an exact comparison, but it's like the Streisand effect. And if you haven't heard what the Streisand effect is, it is when back in 2003, Barbra Streisand tried to get pictures of her brand new home off the internet. And so what's the first thing you do when you hear there's something on the internet cool? You want to go find out what it is, and you want to share it. And the next thing you know, she has an effect named after her in which the mere fact of trying to suppress information has led to it being propagated even further. That being said, again, this is not being shared by the Grand Lodge, but it is on the internet, It is being shared by Chris Hodap's blog. It is being posted on Tom Accuosti's blog. It is being shared on the Masonic Roundtable. You'll hear more podcasts and blogs covered here in the next couple days. We can't sweep this under the rug anymore.
So, what I was gonna say earlier, John, was you said we've heard one side of it.
Yes.
What could the other side be, other than some sort of religious-based misinterpretation, biblical bigotry? I mean, that's it.
Hey, so logically, they could argue that it's within their Grand Lodge code that every Tennessee Mason has seen and was aware of, right? So there's logic there, but
there's no smoking gun here. You know,
Right.
that's an assumption. I would dare say it's probably in the more than in the realm of possibility. But you can always fall back on, well, hey, it's in the Grand Lodge Code. We'll just overlook the fact that the Grand Lodge Code was written at the height of the Reformation. But,
you know what?
I mean,
We're supposed to be the guardians of truth and light, and things need to be brought to light. Period.
in the most friendly manner, and that's the thing is, there are ways to talk about this, and this is what we endeavor to do on the show. We endeavor to talk about hard things that are hitting the fraternity in a friendly and social manner so that people can engage in a constructive discourse. I mean, we're not going to go Grand Lodge shaming here. It's just not going to solve anything.
Yeah, especially since that's totally against my Grand Lodge social media policy.
For your Grand Lodge, not for
Not for me. You guys go for it. I'll listen.
John, don't give them any ideas.
Man, how about that Grand Lodge of Illinois, huh?
I love my Grand Lodge.
But as we mentioned in an earlier episode, although each Grand Lodge is sovereign, its actions reflect globally now. We need to be more aware of what that impact is.
Well, and that's actually what Tom mentioned on when I reposted his post, and that's what he said is that explaining, and this is where it's such a failure of public relations, is that we may see it as Grand Lodge of Tennessee, Grand Lodge of Minnesota, Grand Lodge of Connecticut, whatever, but to the outside world they see Masonry. Masonry has booted a gay member. Masonry has done that. They don't differentiate between that. And until, and this is, I'm going to kind of get there, until Grand Lodges are willing to deal with these larger, broader issues when somebody is going off the norm, and obviously Tennessee, this is what's in their code, but when somebody goes off, the rest of us have to rein them back in, and that's, if you look at the old, I was looking at old returns, it was actually a lot more common back in the day that Grand Lodges would be very particular and meticulous on reading through what everybody was doing in the country and in the world and saying, are they fitting within what is expected every year? And this was an annual process. This wasn't just whatever, well, we chatted and we want to have harmony and stuff like that. They were very particular on what the standards would be. And I don't know if that's something that we need to return to, but that would make more sense to me than, just they'll work it out. They'll work it out on their own. We'll figure it out. It's just not going to work if the public keeps seeing stuff like this.
Mm-hmm. Any final thoughts on that before we move on to the next topic?
I think this is just a message we need to send to everyone. You're here in a fraternity to be a good man who's trying to make himself better, and that's got to be an intrinsic morality, a vice, a subjective one. And if a non-subjective sense of morality can even exist, but I look at a lot of things with the smell test and say, what, does this sound right? And usually, if I've got a bad feeling about it, it's something that could damage the fraternity as a whole.
Okay, then, next topic. Welsh Freemasons deal with a new witch hunt. Jason, you found this on Hodap's blog. Why don't you tell us about it?
I did. So we know that in America, at least, Masons have quite a bit of freedom. It's funny because you look at the UK and you see Masons who are there's something in the news pretty much every other month about political parties and the like trying to force Masons to declare their membership in the Masonic fraternity. And the funny thing is, I think it would be weird to try to force Masons in the U.S. Not to be able to declare their Masonic membership because of all the bling that we wear, and how proud we are of the fact that we are men of light walking this long journey. So this is just the latest in the UK Masonry's near constant battle with local politicians who are saying, no, as a Mason you need to declare yourself as such. And Chris Hodap gives a really good discussion of it, and they're going back to the same old it's the same old papal bull argument. Says, well, if Freemasons have secrets and they then they could be doing something bad, and if they really didn't have anything to hide, then they wouldn't need any secrets, right? And it's the same argument that Pope Clement the 13th wrote down in his papal bull. It's just coming back.
I'm just saying, I mean, why not just tell all the Catholics to pronounce that they're Catholic? Why not? They've done some pretty bad things.
Well, Ash Wednesday is coming up tomorrow, so you'll be able to see.
Pick them out.
But you bring up a good
Full
point.
disclosure, I'm probably going to an Ash Wednesday service.
This is hyperbole, yes, for those who don't understand Robert's sense of humor. But it's true that we have a label.
There's not one group on this planet that meets that doesn't have their own inner core group. Freemasonry just has a larger inner core group, and we're well known. I think it's ridiculous to have to disclose it.
It's 2016. We talked about that. Okay, let's move into our Masonic Monday question.
On Tuesday.
Oh, that's me.
Tuesday.
Man, I'm so excited. Are you guys excited? I'm excited.
Isn't this actually the Masonic Tuesday question on Tuesday, Nick?
Pretty close, because this one came out. I was letting people have one more day to try and answer this question because it was kind of hard. But all right, so the answer was actually the answer was whatever you sent me, because everybody sent some really good responses of how their own Grand Lodge was born. And so for mine, for here, I'm not going to go through the whole details, but one highlight for me was the first new lodge chartered by the Grand Lodge of Minnesota was Hennepin Lodge No. 4, which was my maternal grandfather's home lodge. This lodge dispensation stated that its meeting location was Fort Snelling, which was kind of a big deal. I think Dred Scott was involved with that particular fort and other historical things. So congratulations to Christopher Croto, Jonathan Primo, Chris Streeper, Joey Boyer, Blake Leach, Lauren Lampy, and Mike Hambrecht for answering your question, for answering essentially my open-ended question of how were you born? So going into the question, this one comes from our friend Jason Mitchell, who is now the acting chief adept for the Utah College of Rosicrucians. I don't know, SRICF, I guess. So here is the question that he sent me to ask you guys. Connections between Masonry and Rosicrucianism have been long-standing. We find that Bogdan calls casual connections between the two at Edsel Castle, amuses Threnody, and even in the masks of Ben Jonson and in Poor Robin's Intelligence. Knoop, Jones, and Hammer, however, believe the first direct reference to the Rosicrucian influence on Masonic thought can be dated to the 5th of September, 1730, with the following statement. It must be confessed that there is a society abroad from whom the English Freemasons, ashamed of their true origin as above, have copied a few ceremonies and take great pains to persuade the world that they are derived from them and are the same with them. These are called Rosicrucians from their prime officers, such as our brethren call Grand Master, Warrens, etc., being distinguished on their high days with red crosses. Your question: in what public organ was this quote published? When you have the answer, send it to masonicmonday@gmail.com. Don't forget your lodge name, your lodge number, and the hashtag. What did I just read? Back to you, John.
Thank you, Nick. Always enjoy the light you bring. Appreciate that. Now, moving on to this week's topic, we've had a lot to talk about Masonic news, so let's jump right in. Internet Freemasonry, then and now. The millennial generation, which consists of most of the panel, one sort of kind of on the edge, on the cusp. We'll include him as a honorary millennial nonetheless. We grew up with the internet. However, we did not grow up with Freemasonry and the internet because we were just little babies at the time. But in order to find more information, we need to find someone who was both a Freemason and on the internet way back when you still had to bang two rocks together to get a connection. So, digging through the annals of time, we found Tom Accuosti to share with us.
He still has his cans and string.
So you still got the Progresso can that comes down. Tom, tell us what it was like back in the good old days.
As soon as I plug in my Hayes smart modem and kick it up to the 56 kilobit setting, oh gosh. Okay.
How did you get started?
How did I get started? You know, this is the funny thing because back when I was picking up those AOL discs, you know, the 3.5-inch floppies that no computers come with anymore, and then figuring out how to erase those things and turn them into like actual usable things instead of coasters. I got an AOL account and I spent some time looking for, don't laugh, conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories were just absolutely fascinating to me, and this is like long before X-Files. It was fascinating, and it was also amazing how all these conspiracy theories kept leading you back to the Freemasons. So I hung out in a number of the Usenet groups. Usenet back in the day, it was a combination of like an email list and like a listserv where anybody could post messages or you could read stuff. They were public. For the most part, they were completely unmoderated, and they only dealt in text. There were ways to put pictures up there, but you could only maybe like download a picture. You couldn't see any pictures or any graphics or anything. So it was a text medium. It ran on little clients, usually on your 386 computer or sometimes your Pentium inside computer, and you could exchange a certain amount of private messages, and there were a few other things you could do. But for the most part, everybody used this as a text-based public bulletin board. And I used to follow a lot of the conspiracy groups, and quite often things would be posted to one of the oldest Masonic Usenet groups, Alt Freemasonry. There were about maybe close to actually a dozen Usenet groups that involved Freemasons, but probably only 3, 4, maybe 5 of them actually had any activity. Some of them were very local. A couple were local to England. A couple were local to certain states. So there was Alt Freemasonry, and then someone came up with a moderated Freemason group, soc.org.freemasonry. But Alt Freemasonry was the big one. It was created probably in the mid-90s, and I came along about 3 or 4 years later. I lurked until 1999, maybe 2000, and that's when I finally said, you know what? These guys argue with the conspiracy theory guys so much that they've got to be just the awesomest group, and I got to join them. So actually, this is what actually got me into Freemasonry. I had a couple of friends. It actually is. I had a couple of friends that were saying, "Hey, Tom, come on down to the lodge, come on down to an installation, come on down to a dinner." And I was like, I don't have time for that. But after several years of interacting with the Masons on alt Freemasonry, I started really liking these guys, and I said, you know what, I think I could join. I think I could do this. So that's where it started. So this is probably, like I said, maybe around 2000 is when I stopped lurking and I started posting on alt Freemasonry, and then I started getting out to some other listservs and Yahoo groups, and there were maybe 2 or 3 other web boards at the time that were fairly large. One of them was called the Lodge Room UK, and I believe it's still active, and it's probably the oldest continually active web forum. And at the time, the web forum idea was very simple. It was mostly text-based. You could have a couple of little graphics, but it was more moderated. It didn't have the Wild West. Anybody could join in and start yelling character that Usenet did. I have a fondness for Usenet just because it was so unmoderated, and it was just a very open, very interesting place. There were Masons from all over the world. I talked to guys from Ireland and England and Canada and Australia and South America, and of course all around the United States. And more interestingly, I talked to women Masons. I talked to LeDroit Humane Masons. I talked to Grand Orient Masons. I talked to Masons from all these different districts, and we all seem to get along in a sort of a Rick's American Cafe of Freemasonry, if you get my drift.
Now, let me ask you real quick. Did you also use like IRC, the Internet Relay Chat?
I did. I knew what it was. I had a login if I wanted to use it, but I didn't use it myself for that. I just used it for messaging some very specific things, but I didn't interact Masonically with it. And there was enough for me to do with Usenet and a couple of the other groups that I was active in at the time. And you could as anybody with a Reddit account and a Facebook account knows, you could stretch yourself pretty thin with just a few places. So one of the things I should mention is that I talked to Masons from jurisdictions that my Grand Lodge and probably yours does not recognize, and I had a lot of conversations with these people, and we seem to all get together, or seem to all get along fairly well together. And I saw that there was a little bit of friction, but most of the time it was all right. It was a live and let live type thing. So I was very surprised when I actually became a Freemason a year or two later and understood that, see, I figured everybody knew what I knew because I was a new guy and I was just interacting with a whole bunch of other Masonic nerds. So I figured everybody all knew this stuff already, and I wasn't privy to anything unusual. So when I actually joined a lodge, and look, Friendship Lodge is awesome, but a lot of the guys there were like, there are no women Masons. Grand Orient, you can't talk to those guys. They're clandestine. I said, well, no, clandestine is something else. They're clandestine! So there was a lot of stuff that was happening simply because the forum was so open. You got to know a little bit about everybody and everything, even if you didn't want to learn. I mean, it just happened. There was so much information out there.
I'm sure I'm glad we got over the arguments over clandestine masonry on the internet. I'm glad we got past that. That was irony.
So Tom, this was back where you met Karen.
No, Karen,
Kidd, right?
Karen Kidd I met a few years later on, I noticed that she was on 2 or 3 of the other web forums. She wasn't on Usenet.
Masonic Light.
Masonic Forum, I think Masonic Forum of Light and Novus Ordo Seclorum.
Yep.
Okay.
And there was another one that the name escapes me at the moment. But I remember Karen from those groups. And also Janet Wintermute, by the way, who she used to show up on Usenet more often than on the web boards. I think the web boards were a little tougher because back in the day when people literally did have dial-up connections, the web boards they became a little bit more graphic oriented and a little prettier, and they had lines and colors and pictures, and it really slowed down the connections for a lot of people. So there were a lot of old timers that really preferred Usenet simply because you could set your email client to just dial up, go to the thing, download a bunch of messages, and you could read them offline, respond to them, and upload them later on. It was great for those people who at the time literally paid for their data connections, just the way that we pay for data on your phone now.
It's really funny because I'm seeing a lot of parallels to the way things are today, where every lodge just about nowadays, more or less, has a web page, but does not have a social media page because that's too forward-leaning. That's too, why do you want to just have a discussion on Facebook about Masonry? No, we have a web page that hasn't been updated since '94. So what's wrong with that?
Yeah, there's a lot of that, and actually for a lot of Masons, it's really difficult to do the whole Facebook thing because it's too much activity, and I don't want to say it's difficult for them, but it's difficult for them to do it as a lodge, or I don't know. I get the impression that a lot of Masons, they really don't understand what they can and can't talk about.
So what have you seen going forward, right? So this was your early
foray
into that. How did it progress over time?
Around the time that broadband internet connections started becoming more popular, you started seeing more of the traffic going to the web board. So you had Masonic Forum of Light, you had Novus Ordo Seclorum, and you had, of course, the Lodgrum UK, which was still operating and growing like crazy. And then there were several boards that started out that decided that they wanted to moderate the conversations, and some of them even vetted any people that joined. They wanted pictures of your dues card if you were American, or they wanted to contact the secretary of your lodge. I joined a couple of those. Most of those things didn't hold up well, but there was one board that actually did survive for quite some time, and the Sanctum Sanctorum, which became fairly, I want to say conservative, at least in the Masonic sense, where they were very careful about vetting people who were in the board, and they kept the conversations, how do I put this? It became difficult, at least when it first opened, for people to have conversations about Prince Hall, because at the time, only a handful of states recognized Prince Hall. So almost, I'm saying a handful, probably about, maybe not quite half the states at the time. And I mean, that grew, of course, every year, but there were a number of states that did not recognize their own Prince Hall counterparts, so therefore they didn't want to associate with anybody who was Prince Hall from another state, even if they were mutually recognized. So that ended up causing problems for a number of boards, including the Sanctum Sanctorum for a little bit.
I can't imagine living in an era where one Grand Lodge doesn't recognize Prince Hall. Oh, wait.
And we're still there too.
Right.
Oh, we're live. We'll edit that out later.
But the Prince Hall problem, for the most part, resolved itself as enough people said, "Hey, look, the guy, we're not exchanging ritual, we're not exchanging signs, secrets, or anything like that. There's a Prince Hall guy here. If you don't want to interact with him, don't interact with him. But we're going to allow him into the bulletin board." And so they did that.
Well, and that was the thing with the Masonic Society that also had their own board as well.
Right.
And that was actually formed in response to the Philalethes, and I believe it was Nelson King who said, we're going to start having actual dialogues with Prince Hall, but not just dialogues with Prince Hall, but having a dialogue about recognition. And so then you had the Masonic Society that, although now its mission is not what it was, if you look at the old documentation, it was, well, some people were very sketchy about how the Philalethes was doing in their email server, listservs, were promoting recognition to the point where they were supposedly crowding out the other voices, and that's why you saw the Masonic Society and the Sanctum Sanctorum grow up at the same time, and they both were very, very restrictive on what kind of communication was being held, to the point where it's still surprising that they survived as long as they did. And I think the Masonic Society still runs a board. I dropped out of that a long time ago, but it's just amazing to me that the Prince Hall issue on its own seems to have or recognition on its own, Prince Hall, female Masons, what have you, because of the anonymity of the internet. It's in complete contravention to the idea of regularity and recognition, and my Grand Lodge recognizes this guy but not that guy. And the internet, it's like free for all. We can chat with whoever we want. This is just how it is. So it was always just hilarious to see that on those message boards, is just how tight they would hold the conversations.
Yeah, I agree. It was funny, and the problem is that tightness made it very difficult for those of us who actually started, and for those of us who started with Usenet, or for those of us who started with the very open boards, it made it difficult to actually stay in the more restrictive boards, because it got to the point where you couldn't even joke about things, or you'd have a mod like poking you and reminding you to settle down, or watch your tone, or
remember
something
your
like
oaths.
It's like what you guys do on Reddit now.
Yeah.
Ah,
So much
almost.
banning.
I think one of the issues with Usenet is because it was text-based and it wasn't cute and funny, and you couldn't put your pictures of your cats on there, or you couldn't put pictures of your Masonic ring or your T-shirts and stuff. People became bored with the text-only interface, and they gradually left it. And of course, as broadband became more popular, you could go to Masonic boards, and then eventually you could go to Facebook, which really didn't take off until maybe late 2009, 10, something like that. I mean, I know I joined Facebook fairly early on, but it was pretty much useless because there was nobody for me to talk to. But only after
Facebook
people
started in about 2004, expanded to more colleges in 2005, and then opened up, I think, to everybody a couple years later.
Right, but the thing is, until you actually got to know people, it was kind of like Google Plus. It was there, it was interesting, but you just couldn't really do a whole lot with it. So I think that's what happened to Usenet, and unfortunately, all Freemasonry is still active. soc.org.freemasonry is it's not even active anymore. It's propagated on a handful of servers. I mean, I can get in to see old messages, but the guys who were moderating it just really ran out of steam. There was nobody to take it over, and they wanted to keep it as a moderated group, which meant that people had to look at every email message that came in, which was a little crazy after a while. So they came up with some kind of a script to allow people who had, say, like 5 approved messages they would just like let the messages flow through. But it got to the point where even those of us who already had open privileges could no longer even post there because it just wasn't being kept up. All Freemasonry, there are still a few people that post on there every once in a while, and 2 or 3 times a year I'll go back there and take a look just to see if there's anything interesting happening. But it's been completely taken over by spammers or nutcases, and I mean serious nutcases, ranters. Masons are Baphomet worshippers.
Wow.
Masons control the parking authority, all that type of stuff. So, and you can't argue with these people. You can't even talk to them. But there are 3 or 4 guys who are they're diehards. They're there all the time, and they're answering questions. And God bless them, because that's one wall I really don't need to beat my head against.
All right, so I'm going to open it up for the rest of the hosts to ask any Specific targeted questions to Tom. What it was like back in the day. Juan, what do you think?
I was curious about whether you believe that the group that were in those boards and those groups, have they migrated to what Reddit is now? Because I feel that the culture that you experience in Reddit compared to what we see on our Facebook groups is very different. So I'm curious to know what your opinion is on that.
I've talked about this before with Nick. What I see, to me, Reddit is the closest thing that I've run across to how things were on the Usenet boards. It's not quite as open-minded, and I haven't really figured out why. In other words, it's not the Rick's American Cafe feel. It's close. It's a very open board. It's a free-for-all. But I'm, as a moderator for, I don't know, the last 4 or 5 years, I'm sometimes surprised or maybe even disappointed to see how many posts are actually reported because somebody is complaining that they're not appropriate for a Masonic forum. I mean, we run this as a very open board where people can just kind of talk. I mean, yes, we want the topics to be 90% Freemasonry. Every once in a while, something interesting is going to, or something a little odd, or something is going to come up.
Like sacred geometry will show up,
Sacred geometry. Or T-shirts. Somebody will say, hey, my lodge is selling a T-shirt. Bam, that post gets reported. It's somebody spamming this group. Really, guys? It's another Mason. He wants you to buy a T-shirt. You don't have to buy it. Just ignore him and move on. What is the problem? Why do you have to report? Why do we get 5 reports on a damn post about selling Masonic T-shirts?
Yeah,
that's the part I don't get that.
It's crazy. The way Juan posited the question to you, because when I came into Freemasonry, I had been on Friendster way back. I don't want to say way back.
Yes, that's way back. I'm sorry to let you know, but that's way back.
Yeah, 2003, 2004, I was like on Friendster, right? Then we moved over to MySpace, and then they were like, "Oh, Facebook's public," and I got out on Facebook, and the correlation you made to Facebook back then being like Google Plus is now is perfect. I want to use Google Plus. It's like I'm like Fox Mulder. I want to believe. I don't, but I want to. And so for me coming in, it was just like it was natural to go, hey. I mean, I came in and I literally spawned the conversation in my lodge about having a website. I thought, wow, this is 2008 or 2007 at the time. We don't have a website, and the Grand Lodge had a website, and it was just really weird. And I made a Facebook group, and for a while, like I kept getting that. Oh, I don't know if you should have that. I don't know if that's okay. I don't know. And so we've kind of seen this progression of what's okay in the mainstream, because it seemed like, when you were using like some of the older versions of the forum-based Freemasonry that you were talking about, within that, I mean, were Grand Lodges aware of those kind of things? Did they care? Because they certainly have had an opinion now, and it's weird. I mean, on Whence Came You show, I used to read just like snippets from Grand Lodge websites and to spotlight them, and what would happen was I would get them, they'd email me back and go, well, I don't know if you have permission to read that. Read what? It's on the website. You rang the bell. Things like that just kind of weirded me out. And so I guess my question is, long way around, did you have to deal with Grand Lodges and all these kind of things, talking about these other Freemason groups online?
Actually, that's the funny thing. I made it clear that being on the internet and talking to a lot of these people is what got me into the lodge, and that's what made me interested enough to do that. And now a lot of the guys were a little bit older than I was at the time, so we're going back to like the early, I think 2001. So I was in my early 40s. A lot of the guys at the lodge were in their 40s and 50s, and some of them were in their 60s. But for some reason, we had a lot of engineers at our lodge, and so they were okay with, for the most part, with what I was doing. They were a little odd about, well, there's the whole women Mason thing, and there's the whole like, you shouldn't really be talking to those LDH guys and the Grand Orient guys. But for the most part, they understood that I learned a lot, and that sometimes questions would come up or discussions would come up in the lodge, and I would just like stop and say, well, you know what? Over in Indiana, this is what they do. Or, over in the Philippines, I was talking to somebody there, and they had a similar situation, and here's what they did. And eventually, it became interesting enough for everybody to start asking me, really? What do they do in this place? What do they do in that place?
Did they ever say to you, when did you go visit a lodge over there?
Yeah, well, they did.
Like, hey, there's this magic thing called the internet.
No, I mean, they weren't that. They're not that. I mean, it's Connecticut, so we're not that backwards.
Right.
But eventually, enough of the people that I talked to started to become interested enough. So you have to understand too that in the early 2000s to maybe like 2010, 2012, that was probably maybe not even that late, maybe 2010. That was like the golden age of blogging. We had about a 4, 5, 6 year window. Nick is probably rolling his eyes about this, but
it was beautiful. It was beautiful. I'm not even lying. Oh.
So there was the golden age of blogging, and in 2006 I started my own blog, and enough people in Connecticut read that, and it made them decide, hey, you know what? This internet thing really isn't so bad. And Connecticut spawned we had, I think, the highest per capita number of bloggers in Connecticut for as far as Masonic guys.
Absolutely. It was.
So most of the guys on our Grand Lodge website, because we did have a Grand Lodge website, they read my blog. They listened to some of the podcasts that we were on back in the day. There was Corey Sigler, who we were on. Right. There was Greg Stewart. Thank you. There were a few podcasts that were already going. I would show up on them once in a while. I would be a regular on maybe a few others. And some of these guys, including the Grand Lodge officers, would listen to them because we had a lot of Grand Lodge officers in their 50s and early 60s. So they would listen to these things. When we started our own website, we put a bunch of the blog links on there, and people started reading. It used to be a thrill to me to go to a number of different lodges. I was a district grand lecturer, so it was my job to show up at lodges every once in a while, and I would just be thrilled when somebody would come up to me and say, hey, I just wanted to thank you because I've been reading your blog ever since I was interested in becoming a Mason, and you're like one of the first guys to put a human face instead of this weird esoteric Al Pike kind of thing on there. And there's a number of people who have told me this, and probably just being able to write stuff like that and reach out to people was probably like the most satisfying thing for me.
So Tom, before we go to social media questions, I wanted to just kind of summarize what you've got so far. So you started out with Usenet and alt.freemasonry. You talked about some of the earlier bulletin boards, and then evolved into social media and the blogging scene. Anything you want to culminate this discussion with? Any observations you've seen? Any predictions for the future of Internet Masonry?
It's really difficult. I see it becoming a lot more fractured. Facebook, I think a lot of the discussion groups have moved over to Facebook because it's so easy to set up a Facebook group as opposed to setting up a bulletin board. So Facebook is becoming an actual community within itself, and there are, in case you counted, there are dozens and dozens of Facebook groups, some of them with like 20,000 members, some of them with just a few hundred members. But I think it's becoming a little bit more fractured that way, and maybe a little bit more insular. And what I'm seeing is that they're tightening up, and a lot of the conversations in the Facebook groups are becoming as restrictive as we used to see in some of the bulletin boards when they first started moderating people.
Yeah, it's like a quicker evolution. Like, oh, here we go again, and we get to where you got faster. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Absolutely. We're reaching out to a lot more people, which is good, but what we're actually promoting as information, it's maybe not necessarily the best. So that's where we are. So we can reach more people faster, but if we're actually reaching them with good information, that's the big question.
You mean not
Speaking
an
of,
officer's page that says 2011 to 2012 or something?
speaking of reaching out to other people on the internet, Jason, what are they saying on social media about this topic tonight?
Well, John, first we got to go with the meme. And this is great from Masonic Memes, and we need to figure out who the brother is behind that, because I'm pretty sure we know who he is, or who they are. Brethren, welcome to the internet. I shall be your conductor. And, of course, it's a goat. And that's funny because Masonry.
You know what they say? Everybody on the internet is a goat.
Absolutely.
Actually, Tom and I have been chatting about adding up goats and down to the
Yes.
So if anybody wants to create a nice little GIF or whatever, a graphic for an up goat and a down goat, we'll
I'm
put it.
serious when I tell you I can make that like by this weekend if you guys put it up.
So
Done. So we've got brother Donnie Dillon showing his advanced age. We love you, Donnie. Talking about BBS networks and games and.
So that's a good point. We didn't talk about bulletin board systems, but they were the sometimes depending on, I'm not sure the order which they came up. I think they were pre-Usenet, where these were actually you dialed into a direct connection to someone's modem. So it was not the World Wide Web. It was a point-to-point connection. Some guy would have a bank of modems. You'd have to find out this phone number, and everyone would dial into that center hub, and that's where that community would be. But you'd have to know the phone number and all the baud rate and connection speeds to connect to that center hub. So how did you find that out? You had to go to these computer clubs. You'd have to, I heard this thing, and pass little notes around. And so it was kind of cool when you finally got first connected to those. And yes, I admit I was on some of those early as a kid, and it was a rush because hey, I'm part of something that is hidden from the rest of society. It was pre-internet, and so yes, Donnie, keep up the good work.
So here's a generation gap question from Brother Chris, who said, if there's really a major generational gap or differences between them, as we're talking about how older generations, generally speaking, like to handle things kind of in the house, whereas the newer generations are much more about airing the dirty laundry, as to speak. He said, well, are new generations more or less likely to discuss personal differences and social preferences during lodge? And does social media exacerbate bringing up personal differences in lodge?
I've known many Masons who have unfriended each other over political crap all the time because
I have been unfriended.
Yeah.
As have I.
And so I guess it's bringing together the bonds more closely. I don't know. But, it's kind of interesting. You're right, talking about those insular groups and Facebook. Facebook is kind of making it, like with myself, I use the I don't want to see that button a lot. So I only see on Facebook things that make me happy. So it's mostly like cooking videos. So, and cooking videos and, like, Deadpool trailers. And so it's just kind of funny is that, with Facebook...
The Deadpool trailers make it worth it.
Totally. I love it. Man, I can't
Saturday.
wait. Comic book movie reference.
Gonna
there we
go
go.
see it Saturday.
Gosh, we almost did it.
Almost got through it. But, it's kind of funny, though. It's like with Facebook, it uses ELO ranking to make it so that you only get to see what you want to see, right? And so the differences of opinion and things like that are becoming more and more... They disappear, they dissipate, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Well, then people become more polarized with groupthink.
Exactly.
Well, so that's I think the other thing that Chris is trying to get to in the question is because we are doing more sharing now with social media, and people are more free to express their opinions, whether they be right, wrong, or indifferent, has that carried on into the lodge, whether
No.
outside the lodge room and inside the lodge room? I mean, because another thing too is, I don't know if it's related or not, but you could talk about the respect for your elders thing, right? Even though we're all brothers and we're all on that level, once we get inside the lodge room, I think that, at least I'm speaking anecdotally on my part, as a new Mason, I was just kind of sitting back observing. Even though I had all the rights to correct people in the errors of their ways, I definitely said, oh, this guy has this title of past master, so I should listen to what he says because he's probably right. Boy, was I wrong. But I think because there are people that follow this show that aren't even initiated yet, and they have a lot more knowledge than their soon-to-be brethren are, I think they might feel more empowered to bring up things and correct the less informed. Do you think that's a true assessment?
And you know what? They're still joining too.
Despite that, they're still joining.
So for those people who say, hey, no one's going to want to join the fraternity if people realize the limitations of the organization or the problems we're dealing with. Go ahead, Robert.
No, I was just saying, I think people, our generation generally feels okay with sharing everything out in the open because it adds an element of you're forcing the person or the organization is wrong. You're forcing them into the spotlight so the world can see them and so that they are forced to deal with it and to change. Whereas that doesn't work in the lodge, because when you do that in the lodge, primarily unless you're a very progressive lodge, and there are some great progressive, amazing lodges out there, but I know a lot of lodges where when anybody walks in there, they lower the median age barely at all. You're going from like maybe 70s, 60s down to maybe like 50s. And I think what happens is these preconceived notions, these things that they've dealt with all their lives, and the way it used to be is so solid that the new member isn't going to go in there and say what's on their mind. They're just not. They're going to go out on the internet and go, can you believe this? Can you believe this? I can't believe it. Blah, 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 blah. And then what's going to happen is somebody from their lodge is going to actually go, what's this Facebook thing all about? And they're going to see it, and they're going to get counseled at lodge, and they're going to be made to feel like garbage. I've seen it happen, and it's dangerous. I think what needs to happen is, let me not say what I think needs to happen, but that's my 2 cents.
All right, Jason, what else have we got?
So we've got Brother Scott Sherman, who's listening in. We always love it when Scott listens to us because he provides such awesome commentary. He kind of cut his teeth on the Masonry Forum. He said that was a great time because through that forum, he got to meet brothers from all over because he was traveling a lot for business, and he was never lonely because he'd get picked up and taken to dinners and lodge meetings all the time. Fast forwarding 20 years, the Masonry Forum and CompuServe, which hosted it, is completely gone. Masonry's growing by leaps and bounds. He got an invitation to join a closed group on Masonry and was very warmly welcomed, and found out that it was actually started and populated by a bunch of European Freemasons, that some of whom were women. And Scott relays a story about how this one woman Mason recognized him from the Masonry Forum and just thanked him for being so open and gracious and welcoming to her. And that goes to back to what Tom was talking about with the old Usenet groups, where black, white, female, completely indifferent. It just didn't mean anything, and it wasn't a stigma that it was, or that it is perhaps today. So there was a lot of good, I think, that came out of those those early groups in Masonry. We also have a couple comments from Brother Chris on Reddit, and one of them is pretty good, and I think Nick at least will agree with me. He says, percentage of Reddit posts by topic, 20%. Hey guys, I want to join. 30%. Hey, I just got my blank degree. Hooray. 20% conspiracy theories, 20% interesting Masonic news, and 10% other. Which is probably like, hey, where can I buy a Masonic ring?
You know, those are like really small, teeny amounts. Like, I wouldn't ever go on there for any of those things. You guys gotta bump it up there, guys. I need some real. So you guys gotta.
Well, what do you think? What do you think they talk about on most of the Facebook groups?
Yeah,
Hey,
it's true.
create a tetragrammaton. and tell
Which
people
direction does your ring go? Here we go. That's what it is. This is the most important question we have on every. Is it this way, or is it that way?
Points in or points out, which is I'm glad why Usenet was text-based. You couldn't see which way the points were facing, and
Oh
so
man.
it would make the discussion a lot easier.
And remember,
Well,
it's only a points in, points out discussion until someone gets outed as a clandestine Mason within the thread, and then it turns back to clandestine Mason bashing.
Wolf.
It's the new Godwin's law. On that note, let's start wrapping it up. We're running late. We've had a lot of good discussions, both about Internet Masonry as well as some hot Masonic news. Let's start bringing it home, and let's start with Juan tonight to give us his shameless plug and final thoughts.
It was a time travel. I've been here listening. I'm drowsy as all get out, so I apologize for my lack of participation.
Must be the heat.
I'm burning up in this place. But it's interesting to see the dynamics and the discussions. You know, as you know, I have a Facebook group that has a lot of activity in it, and we see the ebbs and flows of completely useless content and some good stuff comes, and it's good to be there when both things happens. What I dislike the most is just when people are just plain hostile. Yeah, let's talk about difficult topics like we did at the beginning of the show, but come on, people. I mean, just because we're behind a keyboard doesn't mean that the other person on the other side doesn't have any feelings or is not a brother. And that's one of the things that I dislike the most about the Internet Masonry, is that it seems to give people a bravado that they wouldn't have in person. We would have to get physical if people were to say some of the things that they do, some of the things they say in the tone that they say them. They wouldn't say them to people's faces, you know, especially if they were Puerto Rican. You wouldn't play like that. You wouldn't take that. You know, so every now and then we have to go in and not necessarily moderate the conversation, but help people tempering themselves. You know, let's talk about everything. We could, some of these topics, you can't resolve them now by a discussion, you know, in one day. So let's be open to the different positions without having to call people names and try to personally shame them. So, you know, brothers, if you have had experiences on, you know, Internet Masonry then and now, share them on our events page on Facebook or go to theMasonicRoundtable.com and leave your comments there. And I wanted to thank everybody for also listening to The Winding Stairs. I just published a couple of episodes and will continue to do so, celebrating our 3-year anniversary. I can't believe 3 years I've been doing the podcast. So check out episode 36, where I do a trip back in time and I repost the very first episode that I recorded. So that's episode 36. It's a lot of fun to hear, except for the sound quality in some areas might not be as elegant as as it is now, but it's definitely worth a listen. So go to thewindingstairs.com. Thank you, brothers.
Thank you, Juan. Roberts.
Well, my first time ever getting on a computer was a computer that had a 16. That had internet, I should say. Had a 16 gigabyte hard drive. My first computer ever had a 8 megabyte hard drive. Good old Smith Corona Acer. My screen name on AOL was Voltage 95. I was 14 years old, and I used to troll the AOL chat rooms for Nintendo 64 cheat codes for Killer Instinct. And I would put in codes and get tossed all the time because the codes I'd use in the chat would blast good old waveform audio or the wave files, and of my favorite movies, things like Blazing Saddles. And I never thought Freemasonry would find itself on the internet the way it has. I mean, it's always been a niche subject, and I just find it fascinating. And Tom's insight was just brilliant, absolutely captivating to hear about the way it used to be, especially if you're kind of a tech junkie like myself, like I know John is. And so it was just really cool. Again, thanks, Tom, for coming on and sharing that with us, because it is it's something to see. And going and looking back to what you went through, we don't know what the next thing is, but we know maybe the pattern in which it grows. And so it sounds like we may be on the cusp of something soon. That'll be interesting to see. Congrats to Juan for 3 years. I think it's just amazing. As Juan said, his audio quality, to me, has always sounded great, but he is a stickler for quality. And I know his secret about his first microphone ever.
Yeah, tell him.
Yeah, so his first microphone ever, if you guys will remember, way back in the day, they used to have those little stick mics. Okay, and then he had I think some toilet paper or something wrapped around the mic input to act as a pop filter a little bit.
A pantyhose.
Yeah, that's what it was. But it was just brilliant, total MacGyver. Again, so congrats on that. Couldn't be more proud to have listened to all your episodes, and you've shared a ton of light that way. So again,
Thank you, brother.
awesome. WCY podcast. Whence came you? 9:30 Sunday nights. This week I'm off, kind of. I'm going to be putting together the episode. Brother Adam Thayer is our guest host this week. He's going to do the whole show. He's got some great stuff. It's a great episode. The audio quality is going to be a little bit different because he doesn't have the killer setup I've got over here. So you'll be dealing with that, and it's not really a big deal. I think it's still a really good episode. So power through it if you have to, because it's good stuff. Sorry,
And
Adam.
you should ask him about his YouTube show that he used to do.
Oh, Adam Thayer's YouTube show? Yeah, maybe we will. Maybe I'm going to make him put it in the show notes.
Yes.
So, again...
Oh, he's going to kill me.
He will. So Adam Thayer is also a regular for the Midnight Freemasons, where you can catch 3 articles every single week, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We never repost anything unless it's updated, which only happens every once in a while. So I hope you guys check all that stuff out. Thanks so much for watching the show. It was awesome.
Great. Thanks. Jason.
So, yeah, and just to piggyback off of what RJ said, Adam Thayer is actually, I'm going to go ahead and just say this right now, he's actually one of my favorite Midnight Freemasons authors because he is so perceptive and so logical in his approach to writing. He's just absolutely fantastic. So check out Whence Came You, because if Adam's running it, it's going to be very, very good. So check that out. Hey,
I don't want to cut you off. He's got an article going up tomorrow.
Nice.
All right.
So he's much more of a prolific Midnight Freemasoner than I am. I'll get there. No, I won't, but... Anyway, thanks everybody for for watching tonight and sticking with us, and for all of the social media interactions and questions. You know what? Internet Masonry, it's been around for longer than I think any of us newer guys would have imagined. And we're really, really glad that it started as long ago as it did, because I think there's still a major phobia among among a lot of Masons of, the internet is just kind of this new frontier where you can't control the information that gets out there and anyone can say anything. But I think we should really embrace that, because more and more the internet is subject to crowdsourcing. And so if you say something completely backwards, people are going to call you on your crap. And it's. I think Masonry will thrive in the internet age. I think it has, and I think it will continue to do so, as long as people stop trying to fit Internet Masonry into their nice tight box of, this is the only acceptable Grand Lodge type of communication out there. So embrace it, be respectful, be open-minded, and you'll learn a lot. And I know I have. I learned a ton from the internet. Sometimes I even learn things from Nick's blog, but those are few and far between. But hey, yes, March 19th, Saturday, please, please, please consider coming out to hang out with us. We are going to have such a fun time, and a lot of it is going to be really just all about you, and talking a little bit about what you guys are interested in, throwing some surprises your way. It'll be fun. Some of it will be a little wacky. And we're just going to have a celebration of Masonic education where hopefully everybody has a great time and learns a little bit of something along the way. And for those of you who aren't within driving distance, you can always fly, or you could always stream it live. And we will try to iron out those details, get a better agenda out, and figure out what parts of it we will actually be able to stream. But it's going to be a fantastic event. We have an event invite on our Facebook page, the Masonic Roundtable's Facebook page. Go and check it out. Share it with all of your friends, because we're using that to try to gauge interest and how many people will actually be there. Note that you have to pre-register for the event. It's open pretty much to anybody, EAs, fellow crafts, master masons, and we're working on seeing whether or not it'll be open to profanes. We're hoping it will be, because you'll get a lot out of it. So that is my shameless plug at this point, so I'll pass it back to you, John.
Thanks, Jason. Did we get Nick? I can't remember. Nick?
Not yet. But, it's kind of funny is that I decided I needed to look back at how long I've been doing millennialfreemason.com, and I started it in 2007, so I've been doing this stuff almost 10 years, almost 9 years actually. So, I've been involved in this a long time, and so, I used to meet Tom online in all the different forums. I used to meet John online in all the different forums, because, that was just kind of how we did that, and it was just an amazing exchange of ideas, because when I was first joining Masonry, it was horrible to find the door. It was just horrendous, because the websites usually had a guy with a construction hat on and a shovel, and it was like blinking light saying, our officers from 2003, it was the guy who set up the website, set it up, and that was it. And it was, but then I discovered Masonic forums. I discovered listservs, and it was great. I mean, we were exchanging ideas, finding out that, the way that I do it in Minnesota is not the way that people do it in even Wisconsin, which is crazy, I know. But, and it was just an amazing way to break down all these walls, because, Masonry, especially in the United States, having 51 different jurisdictions, those borders are very hard set. You cross into the next one, it's completely different than what you were in the last one, and people don't realize that. And then going even further out, you've got irregular Masons, you've got Prince Hall Masons, Canadian Masons, all that stuff. And it's just amazing to me to see how it's grown from the time when there were like 100 different Masonic blogs. I'm sure Tom is nodding his head, going, "Yep, I remember that." There were like hundreds of Masonic blogs. I actually keep my blog roll that way, yeah. And I keep it on there just because I want to remember all these people, because Tom and I actually were going back to the archive.org. These people have disappeared. So that's the other thing, that the flip side of the coin is that we've done all this stuff online, all this Internet Masonry, but a lot of it disappears. And a lot of really good content disappears. And we're going to lose out on that, and hopefully somebody, somewhere, some secretarial type person is recording that, because this stuff is disappearing fast. Now hopefully Reddit stays around for a while because it's fun. But it's one of those that we're having an archival problem where things, back in the day, things would be written down in a book and somebody else would have it, but everything else just poof, it has disappeared. And so we have to figure out a way to preserve a lot. So with that, my blog, millennialfreemason.com, I've been doing it for 8 years, a little more than 8 years. It's fun. Actually, I'm trying to blog more. Once I move into the new house, it should be good. Let's see, what else? And I'm also on Reddit, reddit.com/r/Freemasonry. And it's a great place. We have a lot of fun. You can also go to /r/Scottish Rite, /r/York Rite, and even /r/Shriners to hang out there. So got a lot of different choices. So with that, I've had a lot of fun doing this Internet Masonry stuff, and I can't wait for more. So.
Thank you, Nick. Tom, you've given us a very fast history of the Internet in general and Internet Masonry in particular. But anything you want to close with to put a bow on it?
Just two quick things. One, I said a little while ago that maybe a period about 10 years ago was probably the golden age of blogging. It's almost as if now is the golden age of podcasting or video podcasting, because as broadband has now reached at least most of the U.S. and Canada and our brothers over in United Kingdom, fast internet access, and more importantly, cheap storage compared to what we had. I mean, gosh, yes, I remember a 20 meg hard drive that had a partition into like 2 10s. That's kind of made now the golden age of video podcast. So this may be where it's going next. So instead of blogs where you have all this written stuff that is unfortunately going the way of GeoCities, we may soon at some point 5 or 10 years from now, a lot of people will be saying, man, all those cool podcasts, all those cool videos that we used to watch, whatever happened to those guys? There's that, and I'm going to post a link to a paper that was written by Trevor McCowan, who is the historian for the Grand Lodge of British Columbia and Yukon Territories. And he had contacted me some years ago. He was writing this for Quattro Coronati. And he wrote a rather longish paper, and I read this not too long ago, where he discussed some of the really early bit before I came along, like the old listserv groups, some of the very, very early websites that went on. He talked a little bit about Ed King. He talked a little bit about several of the other groups that I can't remember the names of anymore, and he mentioned a few blogs that came up. There's Theron Dunn, who we all used to know from the forums, who eventually got into blogging and unfortunately passed away, I think, in 2009. His blog is still up there. A lot of people I know go back and visit it every once in a while. There's a lot of good content, still good written content that's still out there. So at some point, somebody will think to archive it. You know, there's a lot of cheap storage now. It won't go down overnight like GeoCities did, hopefully, but it is disappearing a little bit at a time. So, but thank you for having me on. It's been fun. It's been a little trip down memory lane. I hope I didn't blow too many minds as we talked about this, but It's been fun. It's been a nice trip. I've enjoyed it the whole time, and I'm looking forward to another 10 or 15 or 20 years of seeing where it goes.
Thank you, Tom. I'll be brief tonight. This was a good summary of where we were. I found it fascinating that a lot of the same patterns emerged over time, where you've had your very forward-leaning people who would jump on the next platform and embrace it with open arms, and you'd have the hype curve that would stay behind and kind of just dip their toe in the water to see if it was really feasible, what should we be doing in here. This platform is new, it's different, I don't know what's allowed, what's not allowed. And that's going to happen and continue to happen as we go forward into the future. Look at our Civil Lodge episode, the Castle Island Virtual Lodge episode. That was a fascinating journey. So we'll see what the technology brings with times to come. Thank you very much for watching. See you next week, and keep searching for more light. Have a good night.